Hi, everybody. I'm Vladimir Dutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. El Salvador's president backs the Trump administration in refusing to bring back a man who was mistakenly deported. The latest on the legal fight as the case returns to a courtroom this afternoon. Plus, it's day 2 of a landmark antitrust trial, how Mark Zuckerberg is defending Meta against the FTC's monopoly claims, and why the outcome of that trial could reshape the social media empire. And a historic voyage. Gayle King will join us to talk about her experience on that all-female flight to outer space. This is CBS News 24/7. But we begin this hour with the case of a Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. There's a court hearing happening this afternoon, just one day after the White House and El Salvador's president rejected the idea of bringing him back to the United States. Last week, the Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to facilitate his return. But yesterday in the Oval Office, both leaders said it was not going to happen. Listen.
How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
I want to bring in CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. So, Aaron, the president of the United States somehow wants to take over Greenland. He wants to impose tariffs on the U.S. economy, but he quivers in the face of the president of El Salvador. He has no power when it comes to getting El Salvador to do what he would like them to do. So how are they justifying the Trump administration keeping Kilmar Abrego Garcia in that country?
Vlad, good to be with you. It is really, the crux of it is really the Trump administration's interpretation, spin of that 9-0 Supreme Court ruling that said that the U.S. should, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's return, but also asked the lower court judge to clarify what they're asking the executive branch to do with respect to the power of the executive branch. The Trump administration is taking that, and we've seen this in court filings leading up to yesterday, saying that the courts cannot dictate their foreign policy, what they do in regards to foreign relations. You also saw the Trump administration, despite in court filings, saying that it was an oversight, that it was an error that Abrego Garcia was sent to El Salvador. You've seen White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller saying it was just a clerical mistake and that it wasn't an actual overall mistake for the administration to send him to El Salvador. In part, you're also seeing the Attorney General Pam Bondi really put the onus on the president of El Salvador to make a decision on Abrego Garcia. And as you just mentioned, the president, Bukele, showed no indication of doing that.
The other news that the president made yesterday, Aaron, as you know, is he floated the idea of sending U.S. citizens to prison in El Salvador. What did he say? What is the legal basis for such an act? And what are members of Congress, if any, saying about it?
Yeah, there's no real legal precedent for this. In part, that's why you saw President Trump yesterday ask his Attorney General Pam Bondi to, quote, look into it. What President Trump referred to both in the Oval Office and in an interview with Fox Noticias that we saw a clip of today, he's talking about, quote, homegrown criminals, those who commit crimes, who are U.S. citizens, sending them to, deporting them outside of the country. And in a hot mic moment, you heard him tell President Bukele that he has to build, quote, 5 more places to potentially house these U.S. citizens. Again, no legal precedent for this, but we'll see what the Attorney General, per President Trump's request, puts out as she looks into it.
All right, Aaron, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Meanwhile, a federal judge also blocked President Trump's plan to revoke the legal status of hundreds of thousands of migrants who came to the U.S. legally under the Biden administration. The judge argued deporting people without a case-by-case justification, quote, undermines the rule of law. For more on that ruling, let's bring in CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman. Good to see you, Katrina. So people were facing an April 24th deadline to self-deport. Break down what this means from a legal perspective.
Good morning, Vlad. What this means is there is a temporary reprieve for these individuals who came into the United States under a Biden-era program. It's a temporary stay, but it means for now they will not have to self-deport out of the country. They could be assessed on an individualized case-by-case basis, but by no means is this case done. We are absolutely going to see an appeal from the Trump administration. But what's significant is that for now, these people who came in and were allowed to stay in the U.S. on parole for 2 years do not have to leave the country.
So let's go back to that case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which goes before a judge later today. Help me understand what the White House is asking the judge to clarify, and ultimately what power, if any, the courts have in getting this man back. And Katrina, looking ahead, speculating here, but what would happen if it lands back in the Supreme Court?
Vlad, I'm expecting this hearing today to be highly contentious. The judge had very specifically said that the government has to take steps to bring back Mr. Abrego Garcia to the country. We are seeing that completely flouted in that meeting yesterday with President Trump and President Bukele. They both made it clear that they are not planning to take any steps in that direction. And we're seeing very different interpretations of the Supreme Court's ruling. The judge in the district court clearly sees the word facilitate. The Supreme Court said that the government has to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia as them actually having to take steps to return him. The Trump administration has perceived it a completely different way. So, if this reaches the Supreme Court again, maybe we could get some clarification on that matter. But I think what we're seeing is a potential tipping point here. This could be a case where we're reaching a level where the judge may decide that she needs to hold someone in contempt. That's something that we haven't yet seen in any of these cases. We've seen them nearing that point, but we will potentially see a contempt proceeding proceed here, Vlad.
So how has the legal community been reacting to this?
The legal community is very concerned. One of my sources has described it as though they're watching the Trump administration see how far they can get with, touching an electrical fence. How far can they overreach without a complete pushback from the judicial branch here? As I said, we haven't yet seen anyone held responsible in any of these cases. We haven't reached that level of contempt, but there is deep concern here. We are seeing actions taken that many legal scholars say potentially violate the Constitution. We have so many of these cases, Vlad. There's the case of the pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, where a lot of legal scholars say he is being detained simply on the basis of his free speech. His First Amendment right to free speech is being violated. Yesterday, you and Aaron were just talking about, we heard very concerning talk. President Trump saying that he wants to consider deporting U.S. criminals to El Salvador. Legal scholars say there is no legal basis for this. You can jail someone for their criminal actions, but there's no precedent for deporting them. And in fact, that could be in violation of the Eighth Amendment. It could be considered cruel and unusual punishment. So we are really seeing the Trump administration testing the limits of the judiciary and seeing how far they can push back.
Yeah, I'm just struggling to understand. The only way that it would work is if they do what they have been doing, Katrina, which is grab people off the streets and deport them before anybody knows what's happening. If they go before any judge in the country and try to deport a U.S. citizen to a foreign jail, no judge, no matter their political persuasion, would allow that, right?
You wouldn't think so, Vlad. One thing about this case with Mr. Abrego Garcia is that, it's much bigger than him, because if they bring him back, there could be more actions to bring back the other people that they have deported to El Salvador. And the Trump administration clearly doesn't want to set that precedent.
All right, Katrina Kaufman breaking it down for us. Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you, Vlad.
Bloomberg reports China's government has ordered its airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets as the trade war between the U.S. and Beijing heats up. CBS News has not verified this reporting, but Boeing stock is taking a hit as a result of this. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is here in Studio 55 to talk to me about the economic impact this could have and what kind of a major escalation this represents. Kelly, what are you hearing?
So I wouldn't say that this is a major escalation. This is targeting one company if this report does turn out to be true. But if you think about what Boeing means to the U.S., it's an iconic American company. It's also the biggest exporter for the U.S. So it's not nothing when it comes to our economy. And for Boeing, China is a huge growing market. This could mean a really big impact for them. And of course, Boeing has already struggled. The thing for me that sort of my spidey senses go up when I hear this is what other companies is China going to target? What other companies are they going to go after? Big iconic brands there, Starbucks, Nike, Disney. I mean, all of them have a huge, huge market in China where a lot of their revenue comes from. So you could start to see China play this game, not just retaliatory tariffs, but going after companies that are critical to the American economy, and also CEOs that might start to speak up and say, hey, this is not working for us.
Well, it does seem that some CEOs have been speaking to the president because he's put in this sort of pause on certain tariffs for example, cars. What's the reasoning behind that? Clearly, he sees the turmoil in the markets and he's trying to sort of get ahead of it. But there's so many mixed messages that come from the administration, from the president himself to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, to the Treasury Secretary. It's just, there's always these mixed messages, which is why the markets are so uncertain.
I know, I have a cheat sheet of like all the things as they change.
Yeah, how do you keep track? It's like, okay, the president said this, but Commerce says this, but then Treasury says that. How do you know what's like?
Yeah, exactly. It is very difficult. You know, the auto thing was something that he mentioned as a possibility in the Oval yesterday, and there is precedent for that, because if you go back to when he had the tariffs on Canada and Mexico at the beginning, there was the pause because of all those automobile CEOs saying, hey, this is just not going to work for us. I don't know what the rationale is behind it, but just thinking about the fact that those CEOs lobbied him, that might have, have led to some of those comments yesterday.
So there was a slight bounce back yesterday, and there's a sigh of relief, I guess, on Wall Street because of these 90-day pauses. But then, again, mixed messaging. And so I don't know what the markets are. Okay, so they're up 0.5% this morning, which isn't great if you look at the overall return since the beginning of the year. I mean, what does this all mean?
I mean, investors right now are just very jittery, and
institutional investors too, or
retail investors and institutional investors, because they don't know where to put their money. Because, for example, on Monday, we heard that there's going to be an investigation into the semiconductor space, and so if that happens, you're going to have a bigger tariff on all those chips that NVIDIA is buying, which is going to flow down to big tech and the AI revolution. And so you have investors going, 1 second it's this, 1 second it's this. Morgan Stanley put out a great note for their investors, and they basically said investors are going to continue to get fooled over and over again. So we are not at the bottom when it comes to this market.
Let me ask you, has the outlook for possible recession in this country changed over the last couple of days? We keep talking about the markets, and some days they're up, some days they're down, but it felt as if where we were at the beginning of the year as far as potential for recession has changed dramatically since this tariff thing has gone into effect. What are you hearing?
So no hard data yet. We're not going to get first quarter GDP until the end of April. That's sort of like the first big one, because when you have 2 negative quarters of GDP, that's a recession.
Okay.
But you hear from these big banks that are reporting.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And the CEOs of those banks.
Exactly. BlackRock CEO on Friday said that we may already be in a recession. You're starting to hear that word thrown around by CEOs on these calls. But again, this is just them predicting. We don't have the hard data yet.
But what's so fascinating about this is the way that the administration is sometimes attempts to gaslight people by saying the turmoil that we see is a good thing when it's completely, shooting ourselves in the foot, right? This is not external factors. It's not a pandemic. It's not a housing crisis. It's policy actions that have been taken. And so when you hear that we may potentially be in a recession or we may go into a recession, it sort of boggles the mind, given that this is sort of self-inflicted. We don't have to be here.
It's a fair point, but right now I just always go back to the data. Inflation is going down. The labor market is still healthy. Until we see hard data, I think you're going to hear the White House continue to say this, because they're going to say, look, all the economic indicators are fine. And they are right.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Kelly, thank you very much, as always. Okay, Harvard University has rejected the Trump administration's conditions to alter its admissions and hiring policies. In response, the White House has frozen $2.2 billion in grants. CBS News Boston reporter Julie McDonald has a story from Cambridge.
The conversation is, what in the world is going on? There is so much uncertainty about, is any federal funding safe?
Monday night at Harvard, students swayed back and forth, simultaneously defending the university's defiance of the Trump administration and also expressing concern over what these massive funding cuts mean for cutting-edge research.
These are people who are the best in the world, and that's why they're here. So that research is sort of in jeopardy.
The freeze comes after Harvard rejected a proposal calling for policy changes, including an immediate end to DEI, an audit of viewpoint diversity, discipline for protest encampments, and reforms to international admissions.
The Trump administration is trying to make an example of the wealthy selective institutions, trying to get them to completely overhaul the way they do everything.
Harvard's president explained the university refuses to negotiate over its independence or its constitutional rights. A statement that, according to President Trump's joint task force, quote, reinforces the troubling entitlement mindset that is endemic in our nation's most prestigious universities.
And Harvard said that addressing anti-Semitism remains a priority, strengthening their rules, expanding training, and supporting their Jewish community, but that curtailing research funding would not help with this important work. In Cambridge, I'm Julie McDonald, WBZ News.
Wow, take a look at that. Home security cameras captured the moment a 5.2 magnitude earthquake rattled Southern California. The epicenter of the quake was in Julian, that's a mountain town in San Diego County. The quake was felt as far away as Orange County and even in the country of Mexico. Luckily, there are no reports of injuries or any serious damage. Coming up, the king of space. That's Gayle. She joins me live to talk about what she called one bona fide freaking flight. BFF. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Liftoff.
The moon! You guys, I will have to tell you, look at the moon. 1, 2, 3, taking up space!
Yes, and my CBS Mornings co-host and now astronaut, because the legal definition of an astronaut is what Gayle and those women did yesterday, is back home after a trip that was essentially out of this world. The 10-minute flight to space propelled the crew more than 300,000 feet from the Earth's surface. And Gayle is joining me now to talk more about her trip to space. Gayle, look, we've talked over the course of the last day about this incredible journey. But before I even ask you how you're feeling, can you just talk to our audience about how incredible the folks at Blue Origin are, the scientists and the people that put all this technology together that are some of the best and brightest minds on this planet into propelling you and those 6 astronauts into outer space?
I would actually really like to talk about that, Vlad, because number one, there are so many people who work to get this right. And we spent a lot of time with the crew after, and I kept asking them in all different departments, were you ever worried? Did you ever hesitate? Was there something that concerned you? And to a T, they all said in some version of this, nope, we were never worried because we're good at our job and we know what we're doing. And this, they said, was a very special mission even for them. They recognize the significance of this. I also heard this was the first mission that went perfectly from start to finish. Normally, with every single mission before, there's been a minor hiccup in terms of something that stops the clock. And it's never anything major, but it's always some minor tweak that needs to be made. Nothing that's life-threatening or jeopardizing the project, but they want everything perfect. This particular one, when it went to 2 minus 30 seconds and counting, we knew that after that, there's no changing your mind. The clock doesn't stop. It becomes locked and loaded. But they were so dedicated to this mission and getting it right, and they did. So to hear that it was a flawless mission from beginning to end made us all feel really great. And just to us was another sign of this was meant to be.
It absolutely was meant to be. Now I'd like you to just, again, share with our audience, because they may not be familiar with the biographies and the stories of these incredible women that were with you on this mission. We just showed video of Aisha Bowe holding up a flag of the Bahamas. She's the first Bahamian American in space. Amanda Wynn, who had an incredible story. Some of the things that she had in her go bag that were remarkable. Carrie Ann Flynn, who dreamed of space from the time that she was a little girl. And Lauren, who brought all of you together. And of course, Katie holding up that daisy to represent. I know she's become a meme too, just like you have, Gayle, but that daisy represents her daughter.
Daisy, her daughter's name is Daisy, and she said daisies are considered like weeds. But she said, I want to show the beauty of a daisy and what it does. It always thrives and survives. But I love all their stories. That's why, Vlad, I always sort of hesitate when I hear astronaut, because I don't consider myself that, although I know that's a definition. Aisha Bo, here she is in the Bahamas, and she's told your dreams are too big, you need to dream small. It was suggested that she go to cosmetology school. But not only did she not do that, she now has double degrees, and you're right, she is a rocket scientist. Amanda Wynn was at Harvard, where she was sexually assaulted, and she was in the middle of preparing to go to NASA. She dreamed of being an astronaut. Her word was, she called this healing and justice was a word that she thought of. Because at that time, she had to decide, do I want to pursue justice in my case, or do I want to continue on this path to be an astronaut? She chose justice, and she changed the laws. The rape kits used to only be saved back then for 90 days. Because of her work, it's now been changed to, I believe, 15 years. She did that. She did that. So all these years later, now she is Carrie Ann Flynn, one Hollywood producer, always wanted to go to space. When her little boy was 4, he went to school and said, my mom is going to space. They called him a liar because they said, moms don't go to space. Yesterday, her son, who is now 16, was there to see his mom go to space. I mean, all these stories just gave me goosebumps. Lauren Sanchez, of course, you know, she's a former correspondent. She's a helicopter pilot. She is fearless, I have to say. She put this group together, and she wanted, she called us storytellers, and she wanted exploration. Katie has always dreamed of space. She tried to go years ago with Virgin Galactica, and it didn't work out. So this is very much in her wheelhouse. I was sort of that one, like, where's the square peg in the round hole? That would be me. No. Because I didn't have any of the dreams that these guys had. But yeah, Gayle, I am so glad that I got to go. So glad.
I was thrilled for you. I was thrilled from the moment that you told us that you were going to space. Yeah. And you told me 24 hours before the flight, I had the opportunity to sit down with you and the rest of the crew, and I asked each of you to describe in one word how you were feeling before the launch. And the word that you first used, you said blessed, but then you also said surrender. And we have video of you ringing the bell before you get into the capsule. And if that isn't a look of surrender right there, and as you know, you are now the biggest meme on the internet. That is Gayle surrendering, folks. God. That's what it looks like.
I mean, Vlad, honestly, I wish I would have just smiled a little bit, but I was so afraid. But everybody before me, they're smiling, they're posing. Aisha told us, look, she treated it like the Met Ball of the science world. She said, I was going to make it a runway. I just was concentrating on all the instructions. I was trying to calm my nerves. I was saying my mantra. I just wanted to get in my seat and fasten up correctly. But I meant to tell you this earlier. Aisha had arranged a Zoom call with Bishop T.D. Jakes the night before. So so he did a prayer for us. He did a prayer. I can't believe I forgot to talk about this.
Wow, I didn't know this.
I know, I forgot to talk about this. He did a Zoom call with she and I. Tyler Perry, I called him, he's in Italy, he's a great prayer. He said a prayer with me. So I felt very, very uplifted. But T.D. Jakes said something that I thought was really interesting, because I was saying, I'm so afraid. He said, my dear, fear may be in the car, but fear is not behind the wheel. Isn't that good?
I love that, Gayle.
I love that, too. I can't believe I forgot to tell you guys that earlier today.
Well, you just told our streaming audience, and that's going to definitely make some news. And look, yes. I thought of, my favorite meme was when you came out of the capsule and you kissed the ground, and the one, it said, Gayle King is a survivor. And I just thought that was really, really cool.
I know, they're focusing on the meme going in. Vlad, I've become a meme for the going in. People look at me going in, but then look at me coming out. Look at me coming out. That is happiness right there. Oprah was there, indeed. Favorite daughter Kirby was there, favorite son Will was there.
You could see them in the video that we're showing there. They're the ones wearing yellow.
Yes. That was Oprah's idea. That was Oprah's idea. So yellow is my happy place. My call sign was sunshine, because I think of one of my favorite songs is I'm Walking on Sunshine. Love that. And my favorite color is yellow. So I think
Sunshine. We're just going to start calling you Sunshine in the studio now. Just Sunshine, come in. Where's Sunshine?
Gayle is still
when Patty
good.
goes looking for you.
Gayle's still good, Vlad. Gayle's still good.
I'm so proud of you, Gayle. Thank you for spending some time with us. I know you're incredibly tired, but it's always a joy to spend a little time with you. Thank you very much.
Vlad, could I just say this? I tried to get out of this hit because I would just, can I just lay down for a second? And then they said, it's Vlad. I went, say no more. I'll be there. Here I is.
Thank you. Okay. Here you are. We love you for it. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, bye.
Bye. All right, folks, stick around. We got a lot more news coming up next. In fact, the second Palestinian student from Columbia University is now in ICE custody despite his permanent legal status. What he told our Lilia Luciano moments before he was detained. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. A second pro-Palestinian activist from Columbia University is in federal immigration custody. Immigration officials detained Moshe Madawi yesterday at what was supposed to be his citizenship interview in Vermont. In a TV exclusive, CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano actually spoke with Madawi the night before it happened. She asked him what he wanted people to hear in the event that he was detained. Listen to this.
I want people to know that the work and the activism that we have done was centered in the energy of love. I want people to know that my compassion extended beyond the Palestinian people. My compassion is also for the Jewish people and for the Israelis as well. The accusation that the Palestinian cause and the pro-Palestine movement at Columbia was anti-Semitic is a false accusation.
All right, Lilia is joining me here in Studio 55 to talk more about her exclusive reporting. Lilia, first of all, remarkable circumstances that you actually were able to speak to him. You didn't know that he was going to be detained. Just 24 hours later, he was.
Well, he was a protester. He gave a 60 Minutes interview in late 2023, which kind of, in a way, was used to target him and accuse him of being anti-Semitic. He said everything had been taken out of context. There's these groups online that have been assembling lists and giving them to the government. And one of those groups, Beitar, told us, CBS News, in an email that he was next. And as you said, he is a permanent legal resident of the United States for more than 5 years. When Mahmoud Khalil was detained, arrested, he feared for his safety. He had also been enduring threats online and in person, so he went into hiding to figure out his next steps. I asked him, would you like to do an interview in the event that you're detained? And he said, well, there is a date coming up. Let's talk this day. And we showed up, and sure enough, at this, what he thought was, or what he was told would be taking the test to become a citizen, group of ICE agents showed up. And
so that test was entrapment. It wasn't a real test.
I'm not an attorney, but he went into the building for the interview. The interview started. The attorneys told us, okay, the interview has begun. We noticed that there were people outside, that there were friends of his who were there standing by, but there were also very clearly, I noticed at least a couple of agents, and there were some cars roaming. And suddenly we got a text minutes after the interview began from his attorney saying he's in handcuffs. And he was taken out by Homeland Security investigation agents and just a whole group of agents who were masked, who showed up, arrested him. And you've probably seen the videos that his friend Christopher took. We unfortunately were on the other door by the time we came in.
Yeah, this is the video you're talking
about. That's the video we're talking about. By the time I showed up, and you'll see videos of me driving in, we saw this, all of these cars. There were multiple trucks taking him away. His attorney told us that they were told by the federal agents very little, but that he would be charged with the same provision as Mahmoud Khalil.
So this 18th century law that is being used to detain these individuals.
Basically, the requirement is that the Secretary of State himself has to declare you, without us, at least in the Khalil case for sure, seeing any evidence of crimes, of hate speech, of anything of that nature. It just says that if the Secretary of State himself declares you to be not aligned with the foreign policy of the United States, you could lose, your green card, but these are both, or rather your visa, these are both U.S. citizens, so they could order him to be deported.
This is some incredible reporting, as always.
I'm going to tell you something quick that I just remembered.
Yeah.
By the way, there was an order, a temporary protective order, restraining order that his attorney submitted so that he wouldn't be moved out of Vermont, where we were. When I got in the plane to come to New York to JFK, they said his name. The flight attendants did. So there may have very likely been an intent to take him out of the state of Vermont. His attorneys were not aware. I asked them, hey, why are my flight attendants saying his name, as asking whether this person is in the flight?
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have a lot more tonight on the CBS Evening
Yes.
News. We'll look forward to your reporting. Thanks,
Thank
Lydia.
you, Vlad.
Appreciate it, as always. All right, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the death toll from Russia's strike on Ukraine's northeastern city of Sumy has risen to at least 35, and more than 100 people injured. And this morning, Ukraine's military says it has hit back, striking that Russian base that carried out Sunday's missile attack. Speaking in the Oval Office yesterday, President Trump blamed his predecessor as well as the leaders of Ukraine and Russia for the ongoing conflict, despite the fact, of course, that it was Russia that invaded Ukraine.
Listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope that people give you some missiles.
Joining us now for more on this, from London is CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams. Holly, you've covered this conflict from the very beginning. The president says, do not start a war with someone who's 20 times bigger. Did Ukraine start this war?
Ukraine did not start this war, Vlad. It began when Vladimir Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. Regarding this attack in Sumy, Ukraine says that Russia hit the city with 2 ballistic missiles and that among the 35 killed were 2 children, making it the deadliest strike so far this year. Now, Russia claims it targeted a meeting of Ukrainian military officers, but Ukraine has highlighted what appears to be a large number of civilian casualties. The bombs landed just after 10 o'clock in the morning as many people were out celebrating on the street, celebrating Palm Sunday, when Christians, of course, remember Christ's triumphal entrance into Jerusalem. Now, President Trump called the attack horrible and said, quote, I was told they made a mistake. But America's European allies have condemned the strikes in much stronger language. Finland's foreign minister said that it shows that Russia has zero regard for human life. Poland's foreign minister called it Russia's mocking answer to Ukraine's agreement to a ceasefire deal proposed by the US. And visiting Ukraine today, the Secretary General of NATO called it simply outrageous. Now, that deadly attack on Sumy came shortly after President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, was in Russia for talks with Vladimir Putin.
So this all comes, of course, Holly, as you know, the administration is trying to bring an end to the war, but any way that they are closer to achieving this, bringing the two sides together?
Well, Vlad, the Trump administration has essentially upended US policy on Ukraine, not only initiating direct negotiations with Russia, but seeming to give away possible negotiating positions by saying that it will not support NATO membership for Ukraine, will not send US peacekeepers if there's a ceasefire deal, and even saying that a return to Ukraine's 2014 borders is unrealistic. The US also briefly suspended deliveries of military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine following a contentious, fiery meeting between President Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House in February. At that meeting, Zelensky was given a very public dressing down, and Vice President J.D. Vance suggested that Zelensky was not sufficiently grateful to Trump. Now, all of that has clearly delighted Russia, but the problem for Vladimir Putin now is that while President Trump wants a ceasefire, Putin probably doesn't, because his forces currently have the upper hand on the battlefield. So Russia appears to be essentially slow-walking the process. And the question is how long President Trump will tolerate that until his patience runs out.
All right, Holly Williams reporting from London for us. Holly, as always, we appreciate you. Thank you. All right, turning now to some weather. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Andrew Kosak with the first look at the national forecast.
Hey, Vlad, good morning. Good morning to all of you. It's going to be a really windy day across the Northeast. A very powerful cold front that has made its way through is not only going to be bringing 30 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts, but we've got a little bit of lake effect snow in the order of 3 to 6 inches from upstate New York across Niagara Falls and all the way up to Maine. A little taste of winter as we approach the middle of April. We're also talking about our next storm systems, one after another. You'll notice snow across areas like the Rockies, Wyoming. As we get into your Thursday and Friday, we could have some severe weather possibilities, especially as this front drapes itself across the Midwest and to the deep south. By Saturday, we could be talking about some heavy rain as we approach the holiday weekend. For Sunday, Easter, is going to be a rainy one and kind of messy across the plains and the deep south as well. So we're going to be watching that. As far as severe weather goes, well, we've got a couple of areas to talk about. Saturday and Sunday as we get into the holiday weekend, from basically Kentucky to Missouri and all the way down through Arkansas and Texas. This is the area where we have the risk for heavy rain, gusty winds, and maybe even an isolated tornado. We'll fine tune, but we'll keep an eye on it. Today, at a glance on your Tuesday, a little cooler in areas like LA, some rain in Vegas, a little healthy for the desert there. 95, keeping the heat up in the desert Southwest, turning some of the heat off after some triple-digit heat this past weekend in Texas. We're back into the 70s and 80s along the Gulf Coast, and up toward the Northeast, it's a slightly warmer day, but again, windy across the 95 corridor. We'll start to see things cool down, especially as we get into your Wednesday morning, warmer by Thursday. Vlad?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. Right now, day 2 of the landmark antitrust trial between Meta and the FTC is getting underway. What to expect, what we learned from Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg's testimony. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Day 2 of a historic trial between Meta and the Federal Trade Commission is underway right now in Washington. The social media giant is being accused of purposely buying and squeezing out competing apps. I want to bring in CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi to talk more about this. Caroline, good to see you as always, my friend. So Meta is accused of monopolizing and downgrading the user experience on Instagram and WhatsApp. How did Mark Zuckerberg defend himself and his company on the first day of the trial?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Vlad. This really is an existential threat to Meta as we know it. And Zuckerberg certainly was in the hot seat, first witness on the stand yesterday. And he's defending himself against these allegations by the FTC that Facebook at the time, their acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp over a decade ago actually was anti-competitive behavior, right? So the hallmark of antitrust in this country is benefit to the consumer and potential monopolies in the space. Now, Zuckerberg and his team are saying essentially that anybody under the age of 40 would know that there are more social media platforms to choose from besides just the Meta constellation, they're saying, of apps. There's things like TikTok, things like YouTube, Snapchat. The FTC is hitting back, trying to really narrow the definition of what that market is, saying that really for this one sort of social media, the way people interact on Facebook, there really is only one way to do it. But Zuckerberg is facing some intense evidence that the FTC is showing him emails in which during the acquisition process, essentially they're alleging he engaged in this, it's called buy and bury tactic, not acquiring these apps to sort of benefit the consumer and make a better positive consumer experience, but to buy competitors and essentially bury that risk to Facebook and Meta. So it is really quite a big deal, and we'll see what happens.
So could we see the FTC exercise any antitrust law and force Meta to break ties with these apps, Caroline?
Absolutely. That's the remedy that they are seeking. The judge could impose forcing Meta to divest of Instagram and WhatsApp, essentially bringing them back to independent apps such that they could engage in real competition, right? The competitive process, that's the point of the antitrust laws, to benefit the consumer. They're arguing, the FTC is saying that Facebook has actually lowered its standards when it comes to consumer benefit. They're pushing third-party information, more advertisements, such that if they divested these platforms, maybe the user experience would be better. So, Zuckerberg is pointing out, the FTC approved these transactions back when they were happening, and they essentially want a do-over at this point.
That's hilarious. Caroline Polisi, always great to have you. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it.
Glad.
All right. Have you filed your taxes yet? Anybody, Stan? What? Stan? You just got hours to do so, or you got to request an extension. That's what we're telling our audience. We're telling the people here. You did it. You filed an extension. All right, we're going to give you some last-minute tips next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Got until midnight to file your taxes or request an extension, but the IRS is giving at least 13 states more time to file due to natural disasters. LA County residents have until October 15th to file because of those deadly wildfires, and people in Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee have until November 3rd because of devastating storms and flooding. But for everyone else, today is the deadline. So to answer all of your last-minute questions, let's bring in certified public accountant and tax reporter at Bankrate, Kimberly Washington. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Kimberly, what are some of the common mistakes people make when they are filing their taxes?
Right now, of course, we're in a home stretch. Today, of course, is the last day. And so some common mistakes people often make, of course, is rushing at this time, trying to get everything in. So the best thing to do is just take a breather, take a step back. And one of the things you want to do is review your prior year tax return and see whether or not what type of income or deductions that you claimed last year to make certain that you include everything this year. Also, you want to review your Social Security numbers and your bank account information and make certain that everything is correctly reported on a tax return so that you won't have any delays when it comes to having that tax return processed by the IRS.
Taxpayers often don't take advantage of deductions. What are some deductions if folks are looking to boost their refund, and deductions that may essentially save you some money?
Right. So today you want to look at a couple of different deductions that definitely apply to your certain situation, but some often overlooked deductions if you're someone who is a parent and you're listening right now, and maybe you paid expenses for babysitting services, or it could be nanny services, or even summer camps. You may be entitled to what's called the Parent and Child Dependent Care Credit, rather. So that is something that you do want to keep in mind. If you are a teacher and you're listening, you may want to put some money, of course, away, or maybe you paid money when it comes to educator expenses in the classroom. You can actually take that as a deduction on the tax return. And last but certainly not least, if you're a small business owner, you may want to make certain that you're taking advantage of health insurance. You can take that on the front of the tax return without itemizing. So those are some big deductions you can take today.
And what if you can't make the deadline? I know that that people, life gets in the way and you haven't had time to do it. What is the most important thing that people need to remember if they cannot make the deadline today?
Again, if you can't make the deadline, don't stress, right? The first thing you want to do is head over to the irs.gov website. You can do what's called, of course, a tax extension. That's Form 4868, but you have to do it by the end of the day. So you want to file that extension if you're required to file a tax return. Something else you want to keep in mind, that extension does extend the time to file, but does not extend the time to pay. So if you expect that you're going to owe today, you want to make a payment, you can do that at irs.gov. Make that payment because that's going to reduce any penalties that you may have on your account. And also keep in mind that just making that payment reduces those penalties. And of course, you won't have to worry about that because penalties are pretty much based on unpaid taxes. So you definitely want to make that payment if you have yet to do so.
Very important advice. Kimberly Washington, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, before we go, let's bring back CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Andrew Kozak with the last look at the national forecast. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Vlad. Yeah, we are going to be looking forward to the weekend, big holiday weekend up ahead, Saturday into Sunday. We're going to track a couple of storm systems. For the remainder of the week, though, it's going to be one coming into the Pacific Northwest. The Rockies could get some snow for Thursday into Friday, and then the system really starts to gain some of that strength from the Gulf, moist air, cold air behind it, and we could be looking at some severe weather possibilities from Kentucky all the way back toward Texas as we head toward Saturday and Sunday. For today, though, we're going to start things off with warm temperatures warming up across Texas. Look at Dallas, 70s today, 80s to near 90 by the end of the week. We'll actually, on the opposite side, see things finally cool off in the desert Southwest. Temperatures in the 90s now, by the end of the week in the 80s. And after a bit of a cool down for places like New York and Philadelphia, tomorrow we'll springboard right back up into the 60s, more seasonable by the end of the week. Vlad?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. See you tomorrow. That does it for me, folks, but stay right where you are. After the break, Mugo Diwe is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.